Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. You've caught me doing a job that I should have done about a month ago. This is an epimedium, and epimediums are wonderful, particularly if you've got a very shady, dry area. They're one of those plants that thrive in dry shade. And they have glorious flowers, but they're almost completely hidden by the foliage. So what you should do, round about the middle of February, early March at the latest, is cut the old foliage off, go right back down to the ground. And then as the flowers slowly unfurl, and there's lots in here still to come, the light gets to them, and also, more importantly, you can see them and you can enjoy them. However, it's not too late, but be very careful when you do it not to cut the flowering stems off. That's the issue. So it's the dry stems of the foliage, and just do it one by one. Whatever you do, don't get shears and just sort of cut away thinking that'll do the job. And as I say, they're a lovely plant and they're worth a little bit of trouble, particularly if you do it at the right time. Now, coming up on today's programme, Joe visits a group of neighbours on a street in North London who are championing the front garden.
I really like the way you've got this central bed right in the middle of the front garden, which I guess was paved over before. And you've got a kiwi fruit.
Kiwi, this is my ideas of in early days of gardening. Oh, let's have a little Mediterranean area, you know.
We meet the custodian of an historic garden that was originally planted by a legendary plantswoman.
This is the most famous ditch in England. It is where Margie Fish planted all her snowdrops.
Sue visits a garden in Carmarthenshire, getting advice from a gardener who has embraced the Welsh climate and growing produce that thrives in these conditions.
These are boltardi beetroots, throw them every year. I've tried every variety and I always return to the boltardi because they don't bolt when you get some summer sun. They also produce fantastically big beetroot.
And I shall be adding some shrubs to the dual garden as part of its revamp. You may remember that I showed you last week that we've widened the paths here and dug up where the grass was. So now I've got strips of bare soil and I want to plant them up. Got a tray here of a geranium phyllum, which I have divided up. I did this last year. It's one of those geraniums that does very well in quite deep shade, and this is a fairly shady area. It's got small, really dark flowers, sort of rich burgundy. Flowers early in the season, and then you can cut it back when it's finished flowering and it'll regrow like all hardy geraniums. If you've got them in pots, place them all before you plant any. Set them all out, then you can move them around, and then when planting comes, you just dig a hole and stick them in. And also, I'm not going to plant them in a line along the edge. I want it to work in with the planting that we've got. So we pop that there, and maybe another one back there. Now, as well as the geraniums, I've got Alchemilla mollis. We used to have this lining the long walk, and it spilled right over on the path, completely covering it. Looked magnificent, but not terribly practical. So don't plant something like Alchemilla too close to the edge. But it's fantastic. It will grow in dry conditions, it will grow in wet conditions. It will grow in sunshine, just as much as shade. It's a wonderful plant. This may look like a grass. In fact, it's in the asparagus family. It's Ophiopogon nigrescens. They have a small pink flower, but you don't grow it for the flower. You grow it for the dark, almost black leaves. You can see they're green underneath, and the more shade they have, the greener they'll be. Now, if I wanted to, I could break this into many smaller pieces. A clump like this would give me about 20 new plants. So buy a decent-sized clump from a garden centre, then divide it up yourself, grow them on, and hey presto, you're away. We'll put that there. The beauty of the plants that I'm putting in is that they're tough. They might take a year or two to get to full size, but these will be absolutely fine. Right, I have got a lot more to do, and of course I want to take it on round the corner. And while I'm doing that, we're going to go and join Joe, who went up from his Dorset garden to London to visit something that is all too rare nowadays, a street full of glorious front gardens.
In the UK, around 25% of front gardens have already been paved over, and they're still disappearing at an alarming rate. Now, this street, tucked away in North London, has a row of railway cottage gardens that have bucked the trend in a spectacular fashion.
Front gardens are extremely important, especially in our cities. And it's not just about curb appeal. Even the tiniest of spaces can bring some much-needed greenery to our neighbourhoods. They're a sanctuary for wildlife and help to reduce pollution.
I'm meeting a group of neighbours whose front gardens are flourishing, and it's all down to a great community spirit and love of gardening. Hello, Kathy.
Oh, hello, Joe.
This is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
It's bursting at the seams, your garden. There's a lot of plants in here.
I've always liked herbs and useful plants, so I began slowly sort of getting those. And then the lawns sort of just got smaller and smaller.
There's lots of pollinators in this garden. I've seen bees and hoverflies all over.
Absolutely.
Have you planted with those in mind?
Yes, absolutely. And try to get some things usually in flower all through the year. I think that's really, really important.
You've got lots of height in this garden as well. The arbutus at the front,
Yes.
that's a great tree.
This is a lovely tree. I wanted a lot of edible things in the garden. So that's called arbutus neighbours, which means, I believe, you only eat it once. Is that right?
That's right.
But it's already got the fruit on it now that will ripen in sort of Octoberish, sometime like that.
Yeah.
And that's so intriguing because it has the flowers and the fruit at the same time. And then you've got this beautiful bark.
Yeah, it's a very good coastal plant. It's great for the city as well. Evergreen.
Yes, exactly.
I have tasted the fruit
What did you
once.
think? Once.
It must give you pride in the street that you live in.
I think, well, I'm very proud of it, certainly.
All these gardens are beautiful.
They are.
There's no one letting the sign
No,
down.
well-
Oh, no name.
What I think is brilliant is just the way every single garden is different.
Mike, nice to meet you. I'm Joe. How you doing?
Joe, nice to meet you.
No, this is clever. You don't see that at all from the street side. This is the bins and the recycling,
all
right?
the rubbish in there, yeah. Trying to cover it up and make it a little bit neater. It's a bit wild at the moment, but what I'm trying to do is just slowly arrange the passion flower that it's enough cover. You get a few of the flowers on view.
I really like the way you've got this central bed right in the middle of the front garden, which I guess was paved over before.
Yep.
So you've got a route all the way round it, which is fantastic. Nice big fig tree.
Yeah, there's got a few on there.
Yeah, but it gives you a bit of screening from the house, doesn't it? It does a job.
Yeah,
Now you've got a trumpet vine on the house.
we have.
That's quite unusual, but it shows what a microclimate it is. And this is, what was it? Southwest facing, and it soaks up the heat.
Yeah.
So even if it gets knocked back really hard, it'll still regenerate.
Comes back, yeah.
And you've got a kiwi fruit.
Kiwi, this is my ideas of in early days of gardening. Oh, let's have a little Mediterranean area, But, so this kiwi, it just goes mad. I mean, it runs everywhere.
There are a few things to consider when designing your front garden or just planting it up. For a start, think about how it's going to sit into the streetscape. Now, by that, I mean how they're all going to work together. And what I love about these is that there's not just a sort of single hedge or a variety of hedges just blocking the views into the garden. Some have got hedges, yeah, and some have got sort of tall, wispy plants that create that veiled view. So there's enough privacy from the house to the street, but also you can see in as well. And that works really nicely. Another thing to consider is the volume of planting. Not putting lots of small things into a front garden. So small trees, large shrubs, climbers against the house so that they envelop these gardens, but also soften the houses and help them sit into the street itself. And the last thing, most of these have dug up the central area, planted them up, and we're getting more volume, more plants, more seasonal interest, more bugs, and just more, well, enjoyment for everybody who lives here and walks past. Well, Jane, you've got the largest front garden in the street, haven't you? You've got a corner plot. So do you have a different approach to your front garden?
I think so, because I don't put very delicate things in, because if I have to keep watering it every day, that would be very onerous. So it tends to be tough things,
yeah,
and the grasses are ideal for this.
The framing of your window, the clipping around the window is great.
Yes, yes. When I arrived in 1981, there was 2 columns each side of the window, and I decided I wanted to join it, so I put some stick and trained it over, and then cut it.
What about the Ep2? That's beautiful.
Oh, yes, and that's in a pot, nice big pot too. Yes, I'm very fond of that. But I love the fact that I've actually made friends over the fence with people who have asked me about the plants. And it's just so nice. I think I'm known by a lot of people in the neighbourhood as the garden woman. That's
a lovely thing, the garden woman.
I have noticed, though, that every person in the street has actually improved their gardens. And I'm sure that's a knock-on effect.
It's infectious.
It's infectious
somehow.
Yes.
Oh, Janine, look at you deadheading your lavender. Perfect time of year for it.
Absolutely.
Keeps it nice and compact.
Yes.
So how does it feel to live in this street of lovely gardens?
Oh, it's absolutely wonderful. It's just a little oasis in the heart of London, really. It just gives you your own little space. It separates you from the kind of busy London traffic. And it's just really important to connect with your community.
Yeah, you feel very connected, which is lovely.
Yes.
Is there ever a case of feeling like you need to keep up with the Joneses? Because there's some quite serious gardeners here.
Only in the nicest possible way.
You spur each other on?
Yes.
Eddie, your garden is beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
It sits so well in front of your house. It just looks great.
Yes.
You're obviously into your edibles, and your tomatoes are doing well. I mean, you have got a few flowers. I mean, things like this verbena are beautiful.
I didn't actually plant these. These blew in on the wind from next door. So
everyone's got them dotted all the way down.
I've just left them.
Sweet peas over there.
Sweet peas, yeah.
And you've got
quite fragrant.
Lovely runner beans as well. Beautiful.
Yeah, they're just about to produce, so I'll be eating those next week.
It is inspiring, because if someone walks past here and they've got just a bit of grass or something in their front garden, or have never grown vegetables, you're showing it can be done in the middle of London in a front garden.
That's right.
Got to say, I really admire this group of neighbours. And what I like is that they've all got their own personalities stamped onto their plot. Here we've got edibles and vegetables. Down there there's purple flowers. There's pollinators everywhere. But the combined effort is just staggering. And it's not just this street and these residents that benefit, it's the whole community. And that's what I love about it.
I'm old enough to remember when front gardens were the norm. Most houses had a front garden and many were fascinating. And to see a street like that, brings it all back. And of course, it's not just the individuals, it's everybody that benefits. Now, we've largely emptied the dual garden. And at this stage, what I'm really thinking about doing is getting in structure. If I can get in the woody structure, trees, shrubs, then I can work around that. And this is a buddleia, which I've left in, but like all buddleias, it needs pruning back now. Buddleias flower on new wood. So the harder you prune it, the more new wood there will be, and therefore the more flowers there will be. I'm going to plant another buddleia in the dual garden. This is called Buddleia weyeriana sungold. And instead of having the conventional purple flowers, this has round, globular, yellowy orange flowers. And I'm putting it over here because I am now looking absolutely due south. This, therefore, is the sunniest spot, and that's what buddleias like. I've chosen to put it back here, not in the middle of a border, but near a hedge. And the reason for that is because the hedge is sucking moisture out of the ground. And buddleias flower best in poor soil, good drainage, and actually quite dry conditions. And when a shrub is as small as this, planting it is easy. The only thing to remember is dig a hole that is not much deeper than the pot, but it does need to be wider. Do not add goodness underneath the shrub, because if you do it, you're going to create the most perfect environment for the roots, and they won't want to leave. The roots need to get out into the soil. That should be enough. Let's take this out the pot. And if we plant that like that, I don't want it to go any deeper. In fact, I'm going to lift that up a little bit so it's slightly proud of the soil, and even a little bit more. There we go. That's perfect. I pull the soil round it like that. Now, it's really important to heel it in. Put your heel and go round so that most of the pressure is in a kind of circle around the edge of the roots, almost creating a cone up to the middle of the plant. So it's firmly in the ground, but it's proud, and that means that it's much less likely to be damaged by being too wet. Now, I've got a couple more shrubs that will cope with some shade. These are a pair of hydrangeas. Hydrangea paniculata Wims Red. This starts out very pale, then goes pink, but then goes a dark red. And hydrangeas couldn't be more different to buddleias in the conditions they like. They're very happy in a bit of shade. They don't mind rich soil. They actively like being moist as long as they sit in boggy ground. They do need some drainage. I've got a pair, so I'm going to have one which I'll put over here on this side. I'll find a place for that. And I do know exactly where I want to put this. There was an awful lot in here, but having cleared it, we've got space now, and this is perfect for this hydrangea. So I'll plant this just like I planted the buddleia, not worrying about digging up alliums. Paniculata grow quite strong. If you don't prune them too hard, they can grow 6 to 10 foot tall, or you can prune them down. They're very flexible and very easy to grow. Pop that in like that, plenty of room around it. Backfill it like that. And if you want to prune Hydrangea paniculata, the time to do it is in spring. Now I will water that in. What I would say, unlike the buddleia, if it is very dry, certainly in the first year, give it a good soak once a week, because hydrangeas do not like to dry out. Now, next week, I intend to share with you just how you set about redesigning or even designing from the first place a border or a garden from scratch. Just the nuts and bolts of how to make it work so that it looks its very best. However, now we're off to Somerset to visit the garden of Marjorie Fish. Now, in the 50s and 60s, her writing was incredibly influential, and her garden is still being looked after and loved.
Even on a grey day, it's a heartwarming sight when you see the snowdrops beginning to appear and the crocuses coming under the Acer. It's lovely. My name is Mike Workmeister and I am the current owner of East Lambrook Manor Gardens. We moved here in 2008. I saw an article in a Sunday newspaper about the garden being for sale. So we drove up here. There was an honesty box in the drive. We walked around, garden looked magical, and we kind of fell in love with the place. East Lambrook is the only Grade 1 listed cottage garden in the country. It was created by the celebrated plantswoman and gardening writer Marjorie Fish. Marjorie Fish worked for various Fleet Street editors, latterly for a man called Walter Fish, whom she married. They bought the property in 1937. It was a time after the war when labour was scarce. You had to do it all yourself. I mean, she was very much creating a garden for the masses in a way. Marjorie Fish knew from the beginning she wanted to create a cottage garden. She came to gardening late in life. She was in her mid-40s before she ever picked up a trowel. The story goes that she built all the dry stone walls around the garden. She started writing about gardening for magazines. She had a very easy-to-read style, and she wasn't afraid to write about her mistakes as well as her successes. She created a garden on a human scale, and so many people come here and say they really love the garden. I actually think it's amazing that a garden as famous or well-known as East Lambrook can attract new owners who've kind of nurtured it and looked after it, but kept it very much as it always was. It's one of the things I've done here is to plant bulbs in grass. Late winter is when the Crocus Thomasianus come out under the Acer. I've let them spread into the lawn. And I like the way they just seed naturally. It's a great source of early nectar for the bees. We're clay here, but they seem to like it. And I think the tree roots dry out the soil so they take the water up. It's a good place for crocuses. We tried a little experiment this year because the pigeons always bite off the crocus flowers. We don't know why, but we thought we'd buy a few birds of prey and stick them in the garden. There are no birds at night, but every time I walk past it, it gives me a fright. But crocus around the trees haven't been pecked off. But up there, where we haven't put them, they have been pecked off. The area known as the Woodland Garden is one of my favourite bits of the garden because it's where a lot of the snowdrops are planted and it's full of ferns and other woodlanders. Marjorie Fish was very keen on hellebores. The ones we mainly plant are hellebore hybridus. I like the whites with pink in the flower because it's not the petals you're seeing, it's the calyx, which actually on a hellebore appears to be the petals. And there's some lovely Betula utilis jackmontii there, which look great against the beech hedging. So it has a very friendly feel. I mean, it's a smallish, intimate bit of garden with nice sort of woodland paths between it. Running a historic garden is, yes, it's been an adventure, it's been a challenge. Essentially, it's fun. Walter Fish always said that a garden needs a good structure in the winter of evergreen shrubs. And one of the things that Marjorie Fish did plant was these Chamaecyparis lawsoniana fletcheri, which she called her pudding trees because of the shape they made. And of course, Lawson cypress is fairly quick growing, but eventually these have had to be replaced in the past because they get too big and you can't get down the path here. Because although we clip them every year and clip them as hard back as we can't clip into the old wood because it won't regrow. So a more sensible plant to put in might have been yew, because obviously if a yew gets too big, you can cut it right back and it'll regrow. But these are kind of iconic plants for the garden. This is the most famous ditch in England. It is where Marjorie Fish planted all her snowdrops. Nowadays, of course, they've all hybridized with one another, but there have been one or two snowdrops found in the ditch which are interesting, and they've been named. Most notably, the first one that was found was named Galanthus Marjorie Fish. The snowdrop itself is quite a delicate snowdrop with a long pedicel which comes up and hangs down at an angle. Lovely little snowdrop. I acquired a collection here, which I have added to quite a lot. For my own amusement, I found seedlings which I've grown on. I mean, in order to get one which looks fun, I've grown on hundreds. This one here has rather interesting green markings on its outer petals. This one has a more bulbous flower with stripes. And this one's very simple, really. The green markings on the inner petals look like a rabbit's ears, and we call it bunny. But I haven't officially named them or anything. It's just a bit of fun. We've been here 17 years. I didn't think we'd stay here that long, but it's quite a wrench to leave it. When we came here, I felt the garden had slightly lost the ethos of Marjorie Fish, and I wanted it to feel like a private garden. And I feel that's possibly my legacy. It needs younger, new people with fresh ideas. I'm moving to North Devon, and at the moment it is just a square of grass, and I'm going, hopefully, to create a new, smaller cottage garden.
Well, I've never been to East Lambert, but when I'm down near Taunton, I think I may try and make time for a visit. And clearly, Mike has looked after it wonderfully well, so I hope that the new owners continue that tradition. Now, a tradition that sort of emerged here at Longmeadow is to pack this table outside the potting shed with as many bowls and pots as possible. And this year has been really difficult. It's been the hardest year to get a good display that I can remember. Everything's been very late, very slow to come through. We still got hardly any muscari or scillas. An awful lot of the daffodils are not yet budding. However, there is a display. There are glorious daffodils. We've got the Arctic bells, we've got tete-a-tete, we've got the irises, Pixie and George. So even when it's not at its best, it's still good, and it's good because somehow you're condensing and distilling not just colour, but hope for spring. Now, still to come on today's programme.
So this is...
Sue is in Carmarthenshire, exchanging tips and ideas with a gardener who is growing produce that thrives in the local Welsh climate.
The more we can save our own seed and then grow those same varieties year on year, the better it is as well for success in the garden, because plants are like people. We get happy in places that we're used to, you know.
And we visit a back garden in Edinburgh that's been lovingly developed in a relatively short time with an ingenious design.
The next thing I did was add in the arch. And as soon as I put it over the path, I could see what an incredible effect it had, just helping with that whole illusion of creating space and intrigue and not being able to see the whole space in one go.
Boy. The vegetable garden here is pretty empty now. Spring is the lean time. This is when you've used up all your winter veg and you haven't really got much going for spring. We have got some spring cabbage, which I planted out last October, not ready to harvest yet, but they should be in about a month's time. And we've had a good crop of Arctic King lettuce. Now, I sowed those last August, planted them out in early October, and we didn't harvest them at all until I think it was the end of January, beginning of February. So they sat all winter under cloches, and they're fantastic. So I highly recommend that. Now, I sowed these lettuce in January. So if you sow now, they won't be ready to plant out for another 6 weeks to 2 months. And I wouldn't sow direct yet. If the soil feels cold to the touch, then they will not germinate. But what I am going to do is plant these out into a raised bed. They drain better, so therefore it warms up better. And also a bed on this side of the garden, because it just gets a little bit more sun. Now, I've got two types here. I've got Arctic King, which is the same as those there, and then Little Gem. Now, Little Gem is a cos lettuce, grow quite quickly, will tend to bolt in hot weather, and they make a small lettuce, so it's one per person. So great for sowing now, or if you've sown before, planting out now, harvesting through till about June. And we sow them in a seed tray and then prick them out into individual plugs, which is more work. But it is worth it because you get really nice, strong roots. And because of that, they're healthier and much less likely to be attacked by slugs or snails. But you'll know when they're ready when you take them out of the plug, which you can do gently just by pushing underneath, lifting it out. If it holds together like that, it's perfect. And then to plant it, all you have to do is just make a hole and pop this in. Easy. A little bit of space. These are small, so I don't need to be too far apart. If you're not used to growing in raised beds, they're very easy to make. It doesn't matter what you make them out of, and you want to be able to reach the middle from both sides. And not only do they heat up quicker, so they give you earlier crops, but also they're a much more efficient way of using your space. Right, doesn't matter what time of year it is, water them in. And not only does that give them water, but it also firms the roots in. I'm going to cloche them, and although I leave them open at the ends, it is extraordinary how they're heated up just enough to make a difference. One thing to remember, though, of course, is if you have cloches on for more than a week or two, you are going to have to water because, of course, the rain can't get in. I've been growing vegetables all my life, but I do know that there is always more to learn. You can always discover things, particularly by visiting other people and seeing how they do things. And that's exactly what Sue has done in search of vegetable perfection.
I've been growing fruit and vegetables in my garden for many years, and more recently in my allotment. It's a fun and continuous learning experience. I've got the basics covered, but I feel there's more to consider to get the best out of the growing conditions. So I'm excited to spend the day with local gardener Adam Jones. He's an hour from me in Swansea and has a wealth of experience on how to get the most from his growing space. Adam, thank you so much for having me to your garden. I'm right by the sea. I've got salty, windy conditions, but it can be quite mild. What are the conditions like here with you?
Well, croeso, welcome to the garden. It's a cool, typical Welsh wet garden, let's say that. We're 200 metres above sea level, OK? So what tends to happen is we get a condensed growing season, so we can have late frosts going into June, and we get early frosts then October, end of September. So we have a lot of humidity, especially when we get a bit of summer heat as well. So it can be a challenging environment to be growing vegetables in.
I've really struggled with my courgettes. I've had to sow them 3 times, and they're only now beginning to fruit, which is really late in the season.
And I wish I could help you, but if you saw my non-existent courgettes, I could completely sympathise. We've had difficulty with the peas, a lot of mildews on the peas from being initially dry and then overly humid. But then things like my beans, I initially thought I'd have a poor harvest, but they've cordoned back on fantastically well and they're doing great. So it's not all bad, despite the challenging conditions.
My soil's alkaline. What's your soil like?
When we initially started landscaping the garden, in some areas it was 4.7 on the pH, so that's a very acidic soil. We had to bring in a lot of topsoil, a lot of manure to try and raise the alkalinity of the soil, and we've done that successfully. In terms of the beds, you want a neutral, slightly alkaline soil.
Yeah. So you don't really worry if things don't always go to plan?
My philosophy's always been, give it a go, try everything, try every variety, every cultivar that you can, and then try and evaluate, OK, well, if that didn't work this year, maybe I'll try it in a different area in the garden and see if it works there before giving up completely on it.
But I think we do have to persevere, don't we? If it was all that easy, it wouldn't be fun.
I've probably killed just as amount of plants that I've grown, and I've done it proudly, because that's how you learn, isn't it?
I can see flowers all around me, but I'm dying to see the veg.
Well, let's go see the magic.
Yeah, let's do it. I love a bit of veg. Adam's not fazed by a little wind and rain, and he's adapted what he grows to his local conditions, pests and all. Wow, this is a real smorgasbord of plants.
It's not just one monoculture that attracts aphids. There's no big sign to a fast food outlet saying, come here and prey on my plants. It's about having a hodgepodge of everything.
No, and it's absolutely beautiful. This is a lovely bed of beetroot.
Yeah, these are Baltardi beetroots, so these are my old favourite. I grow them every year. I've tried other varieties like Moulin Rouge and Detroit, and I always return to the Baltardi because they don't bolt when you get some summer sun. They also produce fantastically big beetroots that you can preserve, you can eat them, you can do so many different things with them.
I agree. I've tried the others, and these, I think, are the best. How do you eat them?
Yeah, well, I'm a bit old-fashioned in a way, see. I like to pickle them, I like to roast them, I like to boil them and then eat them with red onions, and then vinegar.
Oh, lovely.
Beautiful, in a salad.
I like them pickled, and then I put them in mashed potatoes, spring onions and mayonnaise.
Ah, that's heaven on a plate, that is. So here, I've recently harvested my turnips, as you can see. Not a bad crop, quite happy with these. But I'm ready to replant it again. I'm going to plant it with some cabbages.
I noticed this. Your turnips look lovely, but planting again with a brassica, that's unusual.
Yeah, people stress a lot about crop rotation and they need to plant plants in separate locations because of disease and problems. But this is the 5th year of me growing brassicas in this bed now. What I found is by annually mulching the garden, I reduce the fungal spores that are available on the soil surface, which reduces disease, and I haven't had any problems in that time. So I don't stress too much about crop rotation, that's what I'll say, because many of us don't have the luxury, of course. Small gardens, you've only got 2 raised beds. If crop rotation is going to stop you growing what you need to grow, then you shouldn't worry about it.
Right, what are we doing next, Adam?
So you're going to be planting the chicory in the centre of the cabbages. I'm going to be planting radish as a quick crop between the cabbages as well.
It's inspiring how Adam makes the most of every bit of space.
There we go.
That looks good, Adam.
Well, the to-do list is getting ticked off soon.
And this includes some rather special beans. These are lovely, long runner beans. What variety are they?
Well, I don't really know what variety. I call them my Tadki bean or my grandfather bean because I've been growing the same seed from my grandfather since 2006 in the garden. He was my gardening hero, and I've continued to save the seed year on year on year. And I keep growing them, so I couldn't tell you what cultivar they are, but they do fantastically well. They're prolific cropping.
Heritage, obviously, is very important to you.
Oh, absolutely. And, when it comes to heritage varieties of vegetables, they grow much better in our climate and they're locally adapted. So the more we can save our own seed and then grow those same varieties year on year, the better it is as well for success in the garden. Because plants are like people. We get happy in places that we're used to, So Welsh seeds, O Gymru from Wales, do really well in my garden.
I hope they're going to do well in my garden too.
I don't see myself as the head gardener here. I'm just one of the gardeners, and nature is my head gardener, and I just go with the flow and hope for the best.
I've had a wonderful time here today, Adam, and I want to thank you because you've really shown me a different way of growing vegetables. Because when you're a vegetable nerd like me, the more information you can get, the better. I'm going to take all those lovely thoughts with me. Diolch, Adam.
Collecting your own seed not only preserves old varieties difficult to get hold of, but also these are seeds that are adapted to your garden, your plot, wherever it might be. Now, I love rhubarb. I've got two varieties here. One is called Timperley Early, and as the name suggests, it's one of the very earliest rhubarbs. And I've got another variety called Victoria, which is very late. Doesn't really start providing anything meaningful until well into April and sometimes early May. But it has really big stems and will go on into July. Now, you shouldn't pick rhubarb after July. Leave it to replenish its stores, and it will go on for ages. These Timperley Early plants I've had now for 36 years. And whatever type of rhubarb you have, never cut it. You always pull rhubarb. So you've got a stem like that, put your hand down at the base and just gently pull and it will come away. And when you pull it away, there will be a little piece of the crown. And the reason you do that is because infection and disease and viruses can get in through cut stems, whereas they won't through the crown. And of course, you don't eat the leaves. And in fact, rhubarb leaves are poisonous for dogs. Not that I've ever known a dog want to eat a rhubarb leaf, but if you find your dog eating it, stop it. Rhubarb need a lot of feeding and quite a lot of water. So rich ground, you can see I've mulched these heavily with compost, and that should be done every year. And if it's dry, give them a really good soak. By the way, these are forcing pots for putting over rhubarb before it starts to grow. They grow in the dark, and they grow paler and taller and thinner, and with much, much smaller leaves, and they're much sweeter. So you get an earlier, sweeter harvest. Now, we're going to see one of the first films of the year that you sent to us. And this is not of a private garden, but a garden for children, where that element of fun is there from the very beginning.
Hi, I'm Saxon, and welcome to HDS Kids Gardening Club. This used to be just a lawn, but we kind of transformed it into a whole garden, thanks to everyone coming here every week. This is Reverend M, who is also my mum, and she is actually the priest in charge of this church. And she's very organised with getting snacks for the crew and everyone around. And that one. Theo, what's your favourite thing about gardening?
Favourite thing? Potatoes. Potatoes.
Planting potatoes?
Yeah. Yes, potatoes. Planting potatoes. Planting stuff and making the world better in the environment. Plants make other ones that give us air.
My favourite thing about this club is that I get to meet new people. Gardening club is just great because it brings us all closer to nature and also closer together. It's like one big happy community here at Gardening Club.
Well, there's no doubt about it. If you want to get children interested in gardens and gardening, make it fun. Now, we do love getting films from you, so please do send them in, particularly if you think your garden is unusual or you've got an aspect of it that is particularly fascinating, or some tips or ideas that you'd like to share with the rest of us. And if you go to our website, you'll get all the details of where and how to send them. Come on in. Come on. Come on, Edward. Come on. When you're planning a new garden or a new border, the best way to produce lots of plants, whether they're annuals or long-lasting perennials, is from seed. Just got a few here to just give a hint of the kind of range we can use. There are some of the old favourites that I've always used in a dual garden, like sunflowers. And I've got here claret, which has got a wonderful rich colour, and I love those marmalade colours. Sunflowers you can sow now, and if you've got somewhere to keep them warm, plant them out in June, but you can also sow them direct. In fact, sometimes it's a lot better to do that. Wait until May, and they normally grow just as well as if you grow them earlier indoors. Tithonias are not difficult to germinate, but can be very temperamental as a seedling. But once they reach a big enough size to go outside, they're fine. Cosmos I love. Always going to have cosmos. They're not difficult to grow, but they are tender. So I've sowed them now, ready to plant out after the last frost, so mid-May. I've got Verbena bonariensis here. I love it. It's a perennial, but I treat it almost as an annual. It's very short-lived. It grows quite easily, but I've never grown it in the dual garden. Well, I'm definitely going to do that this year. And I've also got a perennial that I've not grown before. This is Agastache or Agastache Navajo Sunset, a really beautiful sort of orange hyssop. But it can take up to 3 months to germinate. So if I sow this today, it's going to be the end of June, potentially, before I see anything. It also means that this won't be ready to plant out till next spring. But at the same time, a couple of packets could give me 100 plants. So from relatively easy annuals to relatively complex perennials, try seeds. Well, let's start with the Agastache. Fill that up like that. There we go. Right, now I don't want to waste a single one. Each one of those minute seeds are potentially a beautiful plant that will last for 5 to 10 years. So it's worth really being careful at every stage from now on in. Now, I won't be able to sow those individually. They're too small. So what I do is just take a little pinch and sprinkle. Now, even though they're minute, very gently, I'm going to push down just to make sure there's really good contact with the soil. These need a bit of light to germinate, so I'm going to cover them with a thin layer of vermiculite, which will let in some light. Whereas if I covered them with compost, that would keep the light out. And at the same time, it keeps some moisture in. And again, just firm it gently down. Because these are a very small seed, I will actually put them in a basin of water so it soaks up moisture for about 15 minutes. And then I will put them onto a heated mat in the greenhouse and not let them dry out and wait. And maybe I have to wait for 3 months. But hopefully my patience will be rewarded next summer with a brilliant set of plants that have cost me a fraction of what buying them as mature plants would be. We're going to Scotland now to visit a small garden that had a big dream.
We moved to the house 17 years ago, and it was basically the garden was just laid to lawn. There was some slim borders around the sides, you know, with a few shrubs and herbaceous plants, and there was a cordyline australis tree down the end, which is kind of the only original plant that I've still got. It's got these gorgeous old stone walls, but they're quite tall, a little bit oppressive, and the whole thing did feel a bit boxed in. So it was about 3 years ago that I decided I was going to redevelop it. My name is Libby Webb. I work as a doctor, and this is my garden in Edinburgh city centre. The garden's only 7 meters across by 14 meters long, so it's not a huge space. We were really keen to do all the work ourselves, I guess, you know, to have a sense of ownership, but also to keep the budget down. The first thing I knew I wanted to do was to break up the kind of rectangular effect of the garden, and I knew that the best way of doing this was to introduce a curved path down the garden to give the illusion of a sense of journey so that the eye would follow that rather than take in the boundary walls. So the next thing I wanted to do was introduce some height, and I bought 3 small winter flowering cherry trees, Autumnalis rosea, on a whim actually. And they were pretty small, all 3 of them fit in the boot of my car, and I brought them home. And I planted these 3 trees all offset down the garden. So why a winter flowering cherry tree? I think it's probably the best tree for a small garden in terms of the interest. And you can see it's got this beautiful open canopy, and I thin the laterals just to make sure that there's enough light coming onto the bed below. And it's just a gorgeous structure, beautiful leaf, lovely height. And in the autumn time, you get this fiery, fiery orange. And in the winter, the blossom, it's not like a spring flowering cherry tree. It's not the same show, but it goes on for month after month after month, and it's beautiful. I suppose when I first planted those trees, I probably didn't realize how important they would become, but they very much are the backbone of the garden, and everything sort of subsequently has been built around them, and it's just completely transformed the space. Planting them was the best decision that I made. That was the first year, the trees in the cobbled path. So I guess I had the bit between my teeth at that point because I could see what a transformation just these small changes had made. And so in the second year, looking at the lawn, I kind of realized it wasn't being used, and we just lifted the entire lawn otherwise to create 4 new flower beds. And the next thing I did was add in the arch over the original path. And as soon as I put it over the path, I could see what an incredible effect it had, just helping with that whole illusion of, you know, creating space and intrigue and not being able to see the whole space in one go. So another brilliant thing about arches is the surface area and the amount of planting that you can get on them. I've got this beautiful Solanum crispum here, which is a really fast grower, and Trachelospermum jasminoides, which will be in flower, and the scent just gets trapped in the arch when you're walking through it. Absolute joy. I guess a lot of people have been quite shocked that the garden's only 7 by 14 meters. But actually, I've learned through this process that there are just so many different things that you can consider doing to create the illusion of a sense of space and it being much, much bigger than it actually is. What I would encourage people to do is to think about your boundary wall or fence as your boundary, not a planting guide, and actually bringing everything in from the edges so that it can properly, you know, illuminate and so that the sun can shine through them, just turns a kind of good flower or good plant into something just next level. This is the center of the garden that used to just be covered in lawn, and this is now the kind of showpiece. And the alliums here, I think, demonstrate really beautifully what planting away from the edges can do, because when the sun filters through these, they just glow like lanterns and just create magic. In a small space, light's really important, and in this shady border, I've lifted the base of this camellia and lifted its skirts so that I can underplant it, and I've got this Fatsia japonica, spider's web variety, which is a variegated leaf, which has just got this white, which totally pops in the low light. And combining that with the Astrantia shaggy here, which is also white, and also the Hydrangea petiolaris behind, you get the same effect, just lifting the whole space. So I spent the last 30 years studying and working in medicine as a doctor, considering kind of individual but also population health. So I'm really fascinated with the kind of research, some of which is still in its infancy, but kind of pointing us in the direction that gardening and looking onto green space and working, you know, in nature can reduce our stress hormones, regulate our blood pressure, boost our immune function. And also, it's well documented that it can lift mood, reduce anxiety, help with sleep. And the act of gardening itself, you know, it's functional movement. It's good for us. It's what we should be doing. And it helps strengthen our bones and our muscles and helps with balance, which is particularly important as we get older. So one of my favourite sayings is that you should sit in nature for 20 minutes every day, unless you're busy, and then you should sit for an hour. And I just love the sentiment behind that. And whilst I don't do it or pretend to do it, I think we can all take the message that that's giving us. And there's another saying, which is an apple a day keeps the doctor away, but I just wonder if it might be really good for us to be growing the apple tree as well.
Of course, Libby's absolutely right. It's obviously good for us to spend some time just sitting quietly in our gardens. But if I'm honest, I always say I'm going to do it, and I encourage other people to do it, but I always see things I need to do. And I think any form of gardening is good to do. And if that's just sitting looking at your flowers, great. And if that's digging and hard work, equally great. And talking of hard work, here are your jobs for the weekend. Snowdrops spread by seed, but you can speed up that process by lifting and dividing them, and now is the time to do it. Choose a good-sized clump, dig it up, cut it in half, put half back in the original hole and the other half in a new location. And by doing this every year, you can quickly increase the display. To get the best colour from the bark of dogwood, it's important to prune them regularly, at least every 3 years or even every season, because it's the new shoots that are the brightest. Cut back to an existing framework, and then you can use the cuttings to make new plants. Simply cut them to length, stick them in the ground, and 90 times out of 100, they'll root. If you haven't done so already, it's important to get on and sow sweet peas soon. They have a deep root system, so use a pot rather than a seed tray, and I like to put 3 seeds per 3-inch pot. And then the whole pot can be planted out as one unit. Cover them over and put them somewhere warm to germinate, but they don't need a lot of heat. And then when the seedlings have emerged, they can be put outside to harden off, and they should be ready to plant out in about 6 to 8 weeks' time. Last year, I added, nearly 30 new roses here to the cottage garden. And it included about half a dozen climbing roses, which I've got growing up these supports. And they didn't really need tying in last year because they didn't grow enough to need that support, but they do now. Now, because these are climbing roses, they produce their flowers on new growth. You can see these new shoots just beginning, and these are the ones, as they grow, that will have the flowers. But we do need a framework upon which to carry those new shoots. And it's very important to try and get it going early, to be the skeleton around which we can clothe it with glorious flowers later on. Right, I will continue to do this, but it is the end of today's programme. However, I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next Friday at 8 o'clock. So until then, bye-bye.